Apple is widely considered to be the best company in the world when it comes to user experience, which I personally believe is the most critical component of building a usable product. And to illustrate that point, I want to lay the foundation for today's episode by reading a couple of quotes from Steve Jobs and Tim Cook that provide insight into not only their thought processes, but also their approach to building products, which speaks volumes about the innovative culture at one of the world's leading companies. The first quote is from Tim Cook, who said, "Most business models have focused on self-interest instead of user experience." And the second quote is from Steve Jobs himself, who said that design is not just what it looks like and feels like, design is how it works. And I think if you look at Apple and the products that they develop and the services that they release, that you'll see that. You'll see the user experience bleeding through all the way from the product to the actual physical unpackaging of those products, through the design elements, through the entire organization as a whole. It's very well built brand around user experience. And so joining me today to talk about such a critical topic is SaaS Partners' very own Chief Product Officer, Derrell Johnson. Derrell, welcome to the show.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you for having me on here. Have a blast.
Absolutely. Always fun when we get to connect and talk product. I love it. So, you obviously have an extensive background in and around product development. So I thought there was no one better qualified to come on here and attempt to help us better understand the importance of user experience and the role that it plays in product design. And as a kindred spirit and product guy myself, obviously, that I'm a big believer in and a big advocate of user experience. And I may even go so far as to say that outside of knowing your customer, user experience is the most important component of building a successful business and not just a successful product. So, I know my position, you know my position, but I'd love to hear from you as the expert around what goes into building a product. So let's just kind of start at the high level and then we'll dive in deeper. So the first question I've really got for you is, when people are referring to or talking about user experience, what are they actually referencing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, here in software, we reference user experience. We refer to it as UX. But essentially, to define it, it's just a relationship between a user and a particular system. If you want to define it a little bit further, it's a perceived interaction between a particular user and a product, service, or system.
Okay. And so you talk about UX. We also throw around the acronym of UI as well. What's the kind of core differences between UI and UX? And is that something that works together, or how does that play out?
Sure, absolutely. UX and UI, we always hear them. They're generally coupled together. Sometimes people refer to them interchangeably, which there is a huge difference between the two. UI generally falls under the umbrella of UX, with UI specifically referring to the user interface of a particular system. UI generally will focus on the specific buttons, the placement of the buttons, menus on the screen, icons, or other visual artifacts that make up the system. Whereas UX, user experience, refers to the overall interaction between a human or a user and that particular system or product or service, as well as the emotions that are elicited because of it.
Okay. Yeah, makes perfect sense. So, and I know I'm probably guilty of that at times, UI and UX, especially when I was starting out building products. But as it evolves, so did my knowledge, and luckily I've got some great experts like yourself to help educate me and keep me honest with my terminology. So I appreciate that. There's a lot of people that listen to this show that are focused on building products. They're focused on solving problems, building solutions, taking those solutions to market. At what point should people actually start looking at user experience when designing their products?
Yeah, absolutely. When keeping that in mind, when designing a product or a feature, it should be kept at the forefront when you're doing the development. I mean, really, it should go hand in hand. One thing I like to refer to is Lean UX. There's a whole book on it. A lot of different frameworks reference it within the Agile community. But essentially, with Lean UX, you start with a benefit hypothesis, and essentially that benefit hypothesis looks to define, the benefit to a particular user or the business. From there, you move to a more collaborative design approach. Within that collaborative design approach, traditionally you had a designer, and it was their sole responsibility to do the design. They were the hero, so to say. In the Lean UX, as defined by Scaled Agile, the collaborative design process brings in a various various degrees of different people. So you have the designer, which is essentially leading that process. You
Mm-hmm.
have the engineers, business owners, other stakeholders, architects. Everyone has a role to play, essentially coming up with the design for that particular feature. And then obviously you have a minimum marketable feature. And that's the smallest piece or component of that feature, or if you want to refer to it as the entire product, the MVP, that can then be shipped out and deployed to market. And once it's out in the market, you can get it out into your customers' hands, and you can look to evaluate. So during that evaluation, you can have user surveys, have users essentially evaluate how they feel about using that particular product, and see if that product seeks to solve their problem. See if the solution that you've implemented solves their particular problem that you set out to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a couple of things there that I just want to touch on. For anyone that's
Absolutely.
listening, we will provide a link within the show notes down to Lean UX. That's something we definitely recommend checking out. Great framework there that will help you build a better product. I think that one of the other things that you said in there that I absolutely love is that design is not just for the product team, right? There's so many other stakeholders that
Absolutely.
are involved throughout the entire organization. So you have folks from your marketing team, you have your development team, you have your engineers, your product team, you have your owners. It's literally a company-wide effort, especially in the beginning when you're shipping that initial product, to make sure that you have covered all the different angles, that you understand who your customer is, who you're building for, what you're trying to solve. And all of that also
Absolutely.
translates directly into your minimum viable product as well, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So for anyone that is building this product right now, or that's focusing on building a
Mhm.
product and taking it to market, if they're trying to design it, refine it, start from scratch, whatever, what should they be looking at in terms of user experience? Where do they start? How do they start?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, we've referenced Lean UX, which is a huge part. But if you wanted to take a kind of like a smaller scale, like starting out, something that's referenced in the design in Lean UX rather is design sprints. Just define it how they define it. Essentially, it's a 5-day process that gathers a team, and they seek to define a particular question and then develop an idea, and then build a prototype and test it to see if that actually solves the question at hand. This is generally done within a couple of days to a week. It's extremely useful in getting an idea out and seeing if that idea would potentially work in the market or a real environment. It's not meant to be used to solve every little detail for
Sure.
the MVP or the middle market feature, but it's a great starting point to get teams going in the right direction and get everyone aligned.
So basically, you're just looking to kind of keep it high level and really just focus on that prototype. So how in depth do you need to get? I mean, is these prototypes we're talking about, are these just kind of basic wireframes? Are they functional or clickable? I mean, what's the best way to kind of start there, or what do you recommend?
Yeah, you have different options. I'd say, in terms of just getting something out for the team to kind of just test, and if you want to get some user feedback, I would recommend having a prototype that actually does have clickable buttons. Now, obviously, you can do a no-code prototype, which
Mm.
is it's very lightweight, and I don't know if you'd want to actually have your users using something like that, but I'd say something you want to get get something in your user's hands that they can actually touch and feel. And they might go down a happy path and see, what's going to be the end result, and are you satisfied with that end result? And from there, obviously, you can look to iterate and build. Probably utilize the lean UX process and build more features or more capabilities that can then be used and be pushed out to a broader market.
Sure. And some of the tools that, and you probably use these as well. Actually, I know you've used some of these because we use these as a company, but that I absolutely love are Framer and Proto.io. Those are two of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
So if anyone's looking to figure out, both of those have free versions that you can literally go through. And as he was saying, you can build out clickable prototypes, something that just helps assist not only in really clarifying your vision, but as Derrell said, in answering some of those questions that you're trying to solve for. So I think that's a great way, great actionable step that people can take, and a great product they can use to kind of start designing that overall experience. What are can you kind of give me some examples just so we can make sure that the people are all on the same page in terms of companies that have really done a good job or a great job with their product design?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, you referenced Apple at the beginning. Apple has the software and hardware component. They really just get it right. But another company that I would like to reference would be Amazon.
Yeah.
One of the big things that I took away from Amazon, their design essentially guided by four key tenets. Customer obsession over competitor focus, passion for invention,
Mm-hmm.
commitment to operational excellence, and long-term thinking, which that speaks volumes to Amazon's approach, then being a top five company in the world. And here's a fun fact: Amazon pushes new code every single second of every minute. So every single second of every minute, a customer can potentially have a different user experience or interaction with Amazon when they're using, whether it's a mobile app or they're using the web app, whatever the case may be. Obviously Amazon is in a bunch of different industries now. They have AWS. You can purchase whatever you want from Amazon, but that just speaks volumes to the continuous exploration and continuous delivery and continuous improvement that they've been doing over the last 10, 20, 30 years.
It's unbelievable. I mean, you just think about how some of these companies have implemented DevOps and the ability to push code that frequently and to get new code or updates or changes into the hands of their users to collect that feedback. It requires obviously a tremendous amount of preparation and of
Mm-hmm.
thought and implementation of processes to really capture and benefit from that. But absolutely incredible fun fact right there. So
Mm-hmm.
let's kind of work through some of the things that our listeners can take away, and hopefully we can talk about some of the common mistakes that you see entrepreneurs and product designers in general making when it comes to actually building their products, whether that's an MVP or whether that's kind of a full-fledged offering that's in the marketplace today.
Yeah, absolutely. You and I know this from experience. There's a lot of mistakes that are out there to be made. I'd say one of the biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs and product designers make is trying to figure out the entire design solution from the very beginning. Essentially, they end up doing big design up front, which is very popular with Waterfall, and obviously it has its place, but with the implementation of all these different agile methodologies, you have Scrum and all these different processes that we can use and utilize today. That's probably one of the biggest things that people mess up when they're looking to build a large scale product or accomplish specific goals. When you do big design up front, you're going to have diminishing returns on the customer experience, the customer adoption, which can result in building something that doesn't even satisfy your customer needs that your customer has. It may satisfy a list of requirements, but not necessarily the problem that your customers might have in a particular market. It doesn't provide any value.
That makes sense. So, and that's I think where Agile comes into to play is that Agile focuses on short functional sprints where you're looking at delivering a smaller set of the whole, right, in terms of feature sets and
Precisely.
functionality. Whereas Waterfall, you have all these huge dependencies, and you have to basically get to the end of each phase gate in order to begin new. So I think,
Phase. Yeah.
yeah, that's it. So I think you're right, and especially for building out MVPs and when you're building a product for the first time, agile methodology is definitely the way to go. But I like that advice of kind of breaking things down because that your product, especially the product development process, is such an iterative process that you have to have the ability
Hmm.
to collect that feedback all the way. And then the other thing is being able to prioritize, what's important, whether that's feature sets, whether that's functionality, and being able to kind of adapt. And I think that's, as Agile suggests in the name, gives you the agility to kind of change directions when you need to do so. So, yeah, I think that's
Yeah, absolutely.
you know, a couple of things earlier that we talked about, with having all of the different stakeholders that are kind of involved throughout this user experience and design process. Obviously, at SaaS Partners here, we're huge proponents of human-centered design.
Hmm.
For anyone
Absolutely.
that's listening that may not be familiar, with that concept, can you explain a
Hmm.
little bit about what that is and why the outcomes using human-centered design seem to be much more successful than the other methodologies?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So human-centered design. It's the name is there. Essentially, it's a design methodology that seeks to
Right.
put the needs and the feelings and the emotions and the wants of the customer at the forefront of the particular product or service that is being designed. When products and services are essentially designed this way, it gives the customer a higher sense of perceived value. That higher sense of perceived value, that bodes well for the company because the
Hmm.
company gets to reap the benefits from that. They sell more. They have higher customer reviews. Customers love that. And because this design was designed solely with the customer in mind, it just gives them a sense of this company really gets me. This product really serves my needs really well.
Yeah. No, great answer. And I think just to add to that, obviously coming from a consulting background before launching SaaS Partners and building countless products for clients, when I was doing more
Hmm.
consulting back in the day, one of the problems that we ultimately ran into almost every time we delivered a product is that the big four way of doing things is basically collect the requirements, then you go and build in private, and then you come back to the customer ready to deliver.
That's not what I
I
want.
know,
That's not what I asked for.
exactly, ready to deliver a product. And so I think that's one of the other key differences in this approach is, in this way, you're actually incorporating the end users, the power users, the people that are going to benefit from the system, throughout the entire process. So you never have an opportunity to get to the end and deliver a product without them being included and without them, having the opportunity to provide that feedback that's so valuable in actually building a product and, more importantly, fulfilling a requirement and ultimately a business need. So that's the only thing I would add there. But you're right. I mean, how many times have you or I, in our previous lives, gone through that process, and it's like, you get this big presentation on delivery ready, and you're so pumped to present it, and it just falls flat, and it's just crickets. There's nothing worse than
Yeah,
that. And so,
that's not what I
yeah, and
asked for.
ultimately, that's why we ended up founding this company. Is we knew there was a better way to do it, and I
Yeah.
think that's a large factor to the success that we've had. Um,
One thing that you mentioned that I wanted to touch on, which is really it's a mindset thing.
yes.
We were, and I do it all the time. We refer to requirements. We have to satisfy those requirements. But I think a big thing with human-centered design and design thinking is really having the mindset that it's not essentially a requirement that you're seeking to satisfy, but it's a question or a customer issue or concern that you're seeking to satisfy. And even then, going a step further, people have issues. I come to you and I have an
Yeah.
issue, but that might not be the actual issue. Getting to that root cause of that issue and figuring out, okay, how can I provide a solution that satisfies that issue is really a key component of human-centered design as well as design thinking.
Yeah. So yeah, so solution oriented instead of requirement oriented, right? Which is the old,
Absolutely.
outdated way of doing things. You talked on this a little bit too, and we were just talking about in terms of human centered design involving those stakeholders all the way through. Now, obviously, a big piece of that is going to be user acceptance testing um,
Mhm.
and quality assurance. So, when it does come to user experience and shipping that initial product, how important is testing and quality insurance?
Oh man, you know as well as I know that it's so important just to have a product that actually works the way it's intended to work. There's nothing worse than getting a product that doesn't work or crashes or the one of the worst things that could ever happen, which we've all been there. You get a product from the team and you're giving a demo and it doesn't work or it just crashes in the middle of the demo. It just fails to deliver the expected outcome. That's one of the reasons why I feel like it's imperative that teams adopt uh, agile practices and
Mm-hmm.
methodologies. When developing and building products, essentially it lends itself to short iterative cycles, and I want to make sure that I'm clear. It's inevitable that there's going to be bugs and defects in software. There is no perfect software, but I would say like the major takeaway is how quickly can you respond to those issues and how quickly can they be resolved.
And I think that is a big differentiator there too. Is you know even knowing that there are defects, that's why agile is so important. Is because you have those short iterative sprints, you're able to work in any
Mm-hmm.
bug fixes or any changes very quickly, and then push that back out to the product, right? Make that live.
Absolutely.
Whereas when you have something as Waterfall, for example, that you have all these other dependencies, all these other feature sets, all these other kind of functional components that are also getting shipped during that same deployment, it's very difficult and it takes a long time to actually be able to introduce those fixes for those defects or those bugs into the actual product.
Right.
So, are there any kind of tools? I know you've got a deep bag of tricks over here of what we use here, but are there any tools that people can kind of use to measure the performance or adoption of their design?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, in terms of tools, one of the biggest things is probably going to be, obtaining customer and user feedback. That's extremely valuable in identifying, how your users are using the product. Are they utilizing it in a way that you and your team thought that they would? Is a solution that's been implemented is it accurately delivering the outcomes for your customers as expected? And some ways to verify that. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but essentially observing how a user uses your product. A perfect example, maybe you go home, you have friends or family over. They've never seen this product. It's an app on your phone, for example. Look over their shoulder. Hey, do something for me. How do they go through it? What's their experience essentially with that? Or for instance, you can have user surveys where essentially you're gaining a survey. You're rather obtaining a survey from the user, and you're looking to see, okay, you can have a particular question set, and you want them to answer specific things, or even analytics, where you have those analytics built into the back end of your software, and you're looking to identify, what your customer is doing. And I'd say to take it a step further, with the analytics, you can do A/B testing, where you push out a certain set of features to one set of users, a certain set to another, and you identify, with analytics to see, how are the users responding to that particular features? How are they using the features? And essentially, are they actually using them in the way that they're intended to
Yeah,
use?
and I know I've seen you do this a lot as well, and I know our clients are extremely familiar with this. But even A/B testing the UI as well, right? Different button placement.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you have a certain way that people engage with a website, right? Usually top to bottom, left to right.
Absolutely.
Making use of that real estate effectively is what's extremely important. So I know that you often experiment with button placement and things of that nature, trying to really pull people into the core feature sets and the I guess the functionality or the features they're going to provide the most value, especially when they're starting out. Um, One of the other products that we use here at SaaS Partners, and I'll just cover this one because I absolutely love it, is something called Hotjar. Hotjar is a great product. If you're not familiar with it, it basically creates a heat map uh, of your site and where your users are going. So where their cursor drags to, where they're scrolling to, what links they're clicking on, so that you can really get a strong idea of how they of how intuitive your product is, and then how they ultimately are using your product. And so that's something that you can capture each of the user sessions on as they're using your product, and really get a good idea of how well you've laid things out. And again, I know you, Derrell, get a ton of great information and analytics from that tool, and that ultimately helps drive things forward in terms of product-led growth and so many other things that we'll kind of stay away from just for time's sake. I know you've got a ton of thoughts on product-led growth as well. But as we're kind of wrapping up here, if our listeners forget everything else that you said, over the course of this
Mm-hmm.
discussion, what's the one major takeaway that you want to make sure that they walk away with today?
I'd say that probably the major thing would be always remember to make it simple. An acronym that I've coined is MIS or MISS. It's inevitable that you're going to fail. I hate to say that, but it's inevitable that you will fail. But the point is, you want to fail often and you want to fail early. Don't overcomplicate the design or your features. Do just enough just to get your product or idea to market. Via minimal marketable features and minimal viable products. And over time, as long as you've taken that iterative approach, the simplicity will lend itself throughout your product designs. A big thing is good product design doesn't always get the credit that it deserves because it just works. You go to a door, you don't ask anyone how to use it. It opens and it closes. But poor design will always leave a bad
Yeah,
impression.
absolutely. And I think what a great analogy with a door. I mean, it's design. You know how it works. You're familiar with it, and I think that's something else that you do an incredible job of with the products as well. Is just using the design patterns and features that people have become familiar with. When you're looking
Mm-hmm.
at building a product, the chances are that for a lot of the stuff that you're building, uh, someone else has already done it before you. So being able to kind of take away
Right.
the lessons learned and the things that other people have done well in order to contribute to you building a better product is something that's absolutely paramount. But something else you said in that last exchange reminded me of Reid Hoffman's famous quote about, if you're not embarrassed by your first iteration, then you launch too late. I think that just goes back to what you were saying. Fail early and fail often. But again,
Yeah,
that's how you get
absolutely.
that coveted feedback and really understand how well your product is taken in the market, how intuitive it is, and everything else that you need to actually go forward being successful. So, Derrell, thanks so much for joining me today, and obviously sharing your expertise with our audience.
Absolutely,
I
man.
really hope that they took some notes, and we'll start seeing them build some better products as a result in the future. If there's anyone out there right now looking for help in designing their products, how can they connect with you, Derrell?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn, Derrell Johnson. As discussed earlier, I'm the Chief Product Officer here at SaaS Partners. You can also reach out to me via email. That information will be in the podcast
Yeah, we'll put
description.
all that stuff in the show notes. I'll link your LinkedIn as well as that Lean UX scaled Agile framework we were talking about. And before we leave, I just want to give a big thanks to everybody joining in. And as always, like, comment, and share with an entrepreneur that you know that's trying to build a world-class product. Until next time, I'm your host, Patrick Parker. It's been another great episode of Guaranteed to Grow.